Hello and welcome to this session of Aucademy Live. I'm your educator learner, David Gray Hammond, and today we're joined by CJ. Brief description. I am a white male of Mediterranean descent. I have a beard, thick rimmed glasses, a lip piercing, and an ear tunnel. I'm sat in a very blue room next to the famously rickety bookcase, and in the background there is a map of Middle Earth, because why not? CJ, would you like to do a brief audio description?
Hi, I'm CJ. I am a white Scandinavian descent woman with blonde hair and blue eyes, and I'm wearing a green plaid shirt with blue glasses. They're actually red on the side, and my hair is kind of long. Behind me is basically nothing. This is the cleanest I could get a background. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So for today's trigger warnings, just to warn people, we will be discussing stalking and everything that comes with stalking. So if this is likely to be a triggering topic for you, this might not be the live for you, but hopefully you can stick around, because I think this is a very important topic, and I'm going to get started. So CJ, I guess the most logical place to start is, do you want to tell us a little bit about your story and what brought you to doing this live today?
Okay, so I am a stalking victim. It has been going on for about 10 years, although the start date is technically not known, because the day that I remember meeting him is not apparently the day that he started stalking me. But from the date that I remember meeting him, it's been 2013, late 2013. So just about 10 years that I've known that the stalking is happening. What makes it a little bit more creepy for people is that even though it's like, it appeared to start in person, it was online for a very long time. And then it moved to real life. And it got pretty scary pretty quickly, very rapidly escalated. And I ended up hopping countries to evade that. And part of that is people are not aware of this, but in the United States, you can buy someone's information for $25, like their home address. And it's publicly available information due to data mining, which every country is dealing with data mining and privacy issues. But the United States, unfortunately, is not really capable of tackling that in their current political iteration. So they have not. And data mining in the United States has become very dangerous.
Yeah, I think the thought that you can just buy someone's personal information, that's a really scary thought. And actually, I don't know how many people really know that's a thing, but it is, like, especially with the internet becoming more and more a part of our lives, our information is just sort of out there, isn't it?
Yes, it is. If you complete a survey online, there's a very good chance that, at least in the United States, your address is publicly available information now.
Yeah, and it really sort of highlights that issue of, we really have to think about what information we are giving out and who we're giving it to.
Yeah, you have to be incredibly mindful. It's been exhausting for me. For me, I enjoy checking in online. I enjoy my social media. Like, I guess it's part of the autism in me, but I personally like to connect with people online. And part of being online is proving that you're a real person. So using your real name or close to it, and using real pictures and checking into real places, they give you clout and influence people don't really realize, because they're making you real to people.
Yeah. So how typical would you say your stalking story is of other people that experience stalking?
Well, there are 5 different kinds of stalkers, and I have probably the most rare type of stalker. So there's 5 different types. There's the rejected lover, which is generally like a past relationship that went bad, or it's sour. And then there's the okay, I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. There's stalking that has nothing to do with like an obsession with a relationship, but the stalking that I experience, unfortunately, there's a certain amount of psychosis involved in it, where he believes that I am in love with him, and that is the reason why he cannot let go. Unfortunately, though, if it were just a psychosis, it would be really bad for him, but he also has sexual entitlement, so he is dangerous as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. And having experienced psychosis myself, whilst I recognize that most people experiencing psychosis are more likely to be victims, especially you get that crossover where, like with any group of people, there are dangerous people. And I can imagine if you mix psychosis with that dangerous person, it's a whole new ballgame, essentially, because I know when I've been psychotic, obviously I've never really had that kind of psychosis, but for me it was, very much, I believed my delusions vehemently. It wasn't as simple as someone going, "No, David, you're imagining that." Like for me, it was, I genuinely believed these things.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so scary, is that there is literally no information that I can present that contradicts his sense of reality.
Yeah, and that must be a very scary world to live in.
Yes. For me right now, it's a bit more surreal because I have so much distance. Like the things that I went through when I was still in the US and still in Texas, like it's almost as if they happened to a different person, because now I have more information about him. So some of my fears are like, okay, well, I see why you thought that, but technically he's not capable of that. He had become somewhat omniscient because of all of the things that he was capable of finding out about me. And it was just like, I didn't know how he was getting that information. So I became incredibly paranoid myself. And for me, like, that's just not a person that I recognize anymore. So I don't know. It's definitely scary.
Yeah, I can imagine, and I think when you throw being autistic in on top of it, anyway, because I mean, as autistic people, we're more likely to be victimized in general, but this is a very specific way of being victimized, and it's incredibly intrusive because it's a person accessing private aspects of your life, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of the time, you know, obviously it does happen to autistic people, but a lot of the time when we think about autistic people being victimized, we think about those very overt ways, such as like ableism, filicide, and abuse, like physical abuse or emotional abuse. But
Bullying as well. Bullying is very
yeah,
common.
but I can imagine that it's very frightening that someone out there has managed to access these very intimate details.
Yeah. There are some things that he's still somewhat omniscient to me, because I have not figured out how he found those things out. Like
Yeah,
one day I sent a video through my friend through an encrypted chat to a few friends of a place that I was staying at. And the next day he commented about it on my social media. And I was like, how did you even know about this? I didn't send this to anyone except through encrypted means.
yeah,
And so like there's a certain amount of like, maybe my address isn't private, maybe this isn't private, maybe that's not private. And like every day, like I kind of wake up with the expectation that he may be there. And I may have to think on my feet to survive, which is not something that I'm really capable of. Like the neuropsychologist report that I received when I was diagnosed literally said she needs a environment where she does not have to think on her feet, but can rely on personal expertise in order to get by. And like, it worked out that I have a lot of expertise. Hang on just a second. Sorry, my dog was drinking water and it was quite loud, at least for me. Anyway, he will get his water back as soon as this recording is over. He's fine. He's just, he likes to mark, and so he likes to fill up his tank. But yeah, so like I personally have expertise, so it doesn't matter. Oftentimes I can speak pretty eloquently about like important topics. But if I had to think on my feet for something, on the fly thinking is just not really a talent of mine. And it may end up being important for my survival, which is scary.
I think this is it's a really important point to make as well, because I think it's one of the things that potentially makes stalking unique for autistic people is we may need longer to process things. We may need longer to compute essentially what course of action do I need to take. But in that scenario, you're not necessarily gifted with that much time.
No, you're not. And luckily, the last time something like this happened, I was doing my laundry and he was in the laundromat that I was in, and it was like 1 a.m. And even though I was thinking very slowly, I was able to eventually come to the conclusion that I needed to lie to him, to tell him that I was going to give him my phone number so that he would let me leave to go get my like pen and paper to give it to him. And that probably saved my life. But you know, he's a clever person, and like I don't think I'm going to be able to lie again, you know?
Yeah. So what have your experiences been with trying to tackle this situation? How have you been received by authorities?
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's been really bad. I actually read a document that in the UK, there is a way to ask for a specialized investigator who will interview you based on your neurotype. And I was really impressed with that because otherwise, I mean, first off, they said that it was really limited by the fact that even investigators didn't know that it existed. So, you know, people in the UK may not still be able to access these things. But for me, dealing with police, like there's a whole book about what autistic victims are like compared to what they expect out of victims from police. And obviously we don't match at all. So I've had some pretty upsetting experiences trying to report to the police. And even one time I actually got dragged out of the police station.
I think this is something that's certainly, I know even here in the UK, there is an issue with authorities not doing anything about stalking until something bad has happened. You know, it's always, well, they've not done anything illegal yet. And I know that in the UK has been a big issue, and it has been raised in a couple of places that are fairly high profile, and yet for some reason nothing really seems to change yet. Hopefully it will.
From the outside, I would say that the situation in the UK has a higher profile, so it's actually even though it doesn't appear to be changing, it like there are a lot more resources. Like even online, when people find out I'm being stalked, I tend to accidentally, people don't realize where I am. And since their stalking resource is from the UK, I get sent a lot of UK stalking resources.
Okay.
Australia as well. North America does not seem to have the same awareness about it, but it's also kind of a rare crime to begin with. Usually it's connected to domestic violence. And so it's, you know, most of the infrastructure here is appropriate for most of the stalking. I'm just, because I never dated him, I'm sort of outside the ring of influence there.
Can you speak a bit about what has been helpful in your experience?
So I don't know how it is in other countries, but in Quebec, you can get an educateur or even a social worker who will follow you. And I've had some success with them helping me go to the police because they know how to speak to the police, even if it's not really, even if I tried to explain it the same way that they did, there's just something about them that makes them more official. I guess part of it is that they're associated with the CLSC, which is the government social office. It's also kind of a clinic, but either way, it's just that's been really helpful. When I was in the United States, there was a domestic violence shelter that tried to help me liaison with the police, but they couldn't really understand what I was saying. Like I would say what I thought was needed to be said, and they would be like, I don't really get it. And so there's a certain amount of things that are lost in translation between autistic people and non-autistic people, especially when describing a crime.
It sounds a lot like the double empathy problem is an issue here, because you have, that breakdown in communication when you've got autistic to non-autistic sort of communication. And would you say that that's been a big barrier to getting help with this situation?
I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, that sounds exactly right. And it's really helpful that the social worker that I have now and the educator that I used to have, they were at least willing to communicate with me the way that I know how to communicate and understand what needed to be relayed to the police. But I wasn't diagnosed till I was 30, so I have a lot of masking. But in this specific situation, I am so panicked and so stressed out that there's no way that I could put on a mask.
No, I should imagine that when you think about the fact that we have these monotropic brains, the idea that our brains sort of they prefer to be on a single track, a single attention tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're trying to get on with your life, but constantly having to evaluate your own safety from just about every angle, it's dividing those resources, and it makes it very difficult to let your brain work the way it wants to work, I can imagine.
Yeah, there are certain things that I think about on a daily basis or even on an hourly basis that I know other people just don't. I've definitely lost some of my, the beautiful things about monotropism, like the ability to hyperfocus and stuff like that. I have intrusive thoughts about what's going to happen to me, and they interrupt my ability to focus, to hyperfocus.
I can really sort of empathize with that because, I've had my own experiences of nasty things that have affected my hyperfocus. Obviously different for me because I have the privilege of being a white male, so I'm not likely to be victimized in this particular way, but I can relate to losing that hyper focus and knowing the effect it can have on your well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think as autistic people, we very much, being able to hyper focus is really important to our, well, really every aspect of our lives. It's how our brain works.
Yeah, it's how we experience pleasure. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, everybody talks about, or at least when I was in university, like 10 years ago, like I had to write an essay on flow, and hyperfocus is flow. It's pure joy, really.
yeah. So can you think of, obviously we've sort of talked about the communication issues between yourself and authorities. Is there anything else that sort of about being autistic that has sort of in your mind made this a more unique experience?
Well, I mean, every stalking victim has trouble communicating what's happening because not every act of stalking is sinister on its face. So we're being classically conditioned to associate the stimulus with like bad things happening to us. And so like he sent me flowers once. Like, isn't that fine? No, that was bad. Very bad. He's thinking about me, and that's dangerous. But on top of that, I think everybody has like this mentality that if this happened to them, they know exactly what would happen and like how they would fix it and how they would react, like especially if they were in another country when this person was threatening them, how they would go about what they want to do or fix to eliminate the situation. And that's just such a minefield to navigate, even if you're not autistic. It's like, it's just really, I have not had much success talking about my victimhood or addressing like the difficulties that I have because of my victimhood with people who are not autistic. It is accidentally burned bridges.
I can imagine that by necessity, some bridges do have to be burned anyway when you're trying to evade a person like this.
Yeah. I remember like just about a month ago, I was talking to the educatrice of my school, and I was like, okay, so we're having trouble because I take longer breaks than other students during French class. And she was like, okay, well, we're going to give you accommodation to take these longer breaks, but they're only going to be an extra 10 minutes. You're going to have to make sure to be back perfectly on time. And I was like, this is fine, except for one exception. And that is if I get a threat from my stalker, I mean, I can try and come back, but I'm not going to be there, you know? And she did not really get that. She was like, he's in another country. He's in Texas. That's too far away from Quebec for you to be worried. And I was like, no, this guy travels. Like people in it. I'm personally the only person who knows all of the evidence. No one else has ever gone through all of the evidence, which is stressful in its own right. But I'm the only person who can make these evaluations about what he's capable of and what he's not. And it stresses me out when people assume things that they don't know. I mean, recently I got a message from him, you bleep, I will catch you someday. And, you know, I don't know how that fits into his psychosis, but, you know, he's already had fantasies about and relayed them about murdering me. So, yeah.
It's, I think perhaps one of the issues with trying to get people to understand is that stalking is one of those things that's kind of like, you know, the way everyone goes, oh, you know, I'm really OCD about this. You know, people misuse the word stalker a lot, and there's a lot of misconceptions. I think, you know, I've come across people who go, oh, I'm just Facebook stalking my ex, and I'm like, no, you're looking at their profile. It's completely different.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a healthy amount of interest in like what happens to your ex. There are exes that I haven't dated in 10 years that I look up, like, I hope you're having a good life now, like, you know? And, I think that's completely healthy. Just, they became such a big part of your life for however long. You want to follow along and see what's going on with their life. It makes sense.
Yeah. But I know for me, it's one of my pet peeves, that things like this have almost been trivialized by the way they used, because you come across people who, as I say, they use the word stalker or stalking without realizing the ramifications of what that's really referring to.
Oh, so I've come to the conclusion that there are too many frustrating things in life to be frustrated about people misusing these things. Okay. But that's only because I've just mellowed out as a person, and I realized that I used to be really, really uptight and kind of drawn into myself because no one could really say anything that I wasn't upset about on the inside. And I just got to a point where I was like, I kind of have to just accept these things. They're obviously not the right way to talk about any of this, but they're human. I'm human. Let's just accept that there are some flaws here.
Yeah. So, sort of switching gears a little bit, if an autistic person was experiencing stalking, and let's say it's a whole new experience to them, it's just they've only just become aware of it, and they have no idea what to do. What advice could you offer as someone who's been sort of going through this for 10 years?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is it's not just annoying, it's a crime. So I personally got a little hung up on the fact that I don't like unexpected social interactions. So I was like, the real reason that I don't like this is because, it's unexpected social interactions. But the reality of it is that his obsession is a danger to me. And so I needed, even earlier than I started to start contacting the police and building a case, because it can escalate. And even though you currently feel safe, and it's kind of unbelievable that this person is dangerous to you, it is a good idea to go ahead and start taking it seriously. I have read a document online. I believe it was an academic study, and it found that most victims did not report a large percentage of their the stalking activities. I'm sorry, my dogs are going after it. I'm so sorry.
I really wasn't laughing at what you were saying. I just suddenly noticed what the dogs were doing in the background.
She's spayed. I don't really know why she does that. She's been spayed since she was 12 weeks old. But either way, so most victims, autistic or not, do not recognize the stalking in the beginning, and they dismiss early signs of it. And I personally, the only reason I started reporting to the police, is because my friends told me, that's probably not a good idea. It speaks to the value of having a variety of friends, because not all of my friends are autistic. And so my autistic friends, they may not have had the social insight to go, oh, this guy, that might be normal for us or something like that. But that's really abnormal behavior outside of autism.
So it sounds to me like one of the really big sort of take-home messages is that we're sort of conditioned to almost gaslight ourselves into thinking, oh, this is just an inconvenience. but actually you need to, from the start, try and take it as seriously as possible as soon as that pattern starts to emerge.
And even if the police won't take your report, document it somewhere. And like I started using Google Docs, not Google Docs, but Google Drive. And like my Google Drive is almost full of evidence at this point. But yeah, it's just anywhere that's convenient, go ahead and start dropping evidence or writing a short report for yourself with like the date and time and a short whatever about what happened. That's plenty, you know?
So I think that's really helpful information for people. Is there, you've talked a bit about, you know, there's 5 different types of stalkers and things like that. Is there like a place online where people can go and learn about this stuff reliably?
You know, I don't know. I personally, like, I have a deep interest in academic studies. And so I learned it from like Google Scholar and taking advantage of those links that Google says are the free versions of it. Okay. And sometimes when I can't get a copy of the article through Google and it looks particularly interesting, I will email the author, the corresponding author, and ask for the paper, which is usually obliged.
Yeah, that's something that people don't often realize, is that academics who author papers are usually more than happy to email you the paper if you're not going to run off and plagiarize their work.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that's an important tool for especially autistic people to have, because, you know, we are a people who love to research things, and you know, there is probably, I can imagine, quite a world of information out there on Google Scholar.
There's a lot of information. I used to be a grad student, so I had institutional access to the great wide academic publishing world, and that was beautiful. I mean, there was a lot of things that I grieved when I stopped being a grad student, but one of them was definitely the institutional access.
Yeah, institutional access is a useful thing.
Definitely.
But yeah, so bear with me a second. My brain is ADHDing and I'm losing my train of thought.
And I mean, I don't want to out you or anything, but you're not feeling well right now.
No, I'm not. I am COVID positive. You've started a blog, haven't you?
I started a blog. Unfortunately, I've gotten to a point where I've written the things that I want to talk about, and I don't know if I want to continue writing on it or not. I'm sorry, my dog is singing.
That's okay.
What, Shadow? Come here. Come here, buddy. Nancy, you're gonna have to share. All right. Sorry. I don't know what was happening there, but I eliminated it, so we're good. We're
good. Okay. Well, there will be some links in the information, the captions for this live, which you can follow if you want to support CJ. And CJ, is there sort of anything else that you feel is really important to add to this live stream? Anything I've not asked about?
Oh, so I have just launched, well, okay. It's actually kind of old. I did the deposit on it. So after I got the deposit, I let it sit for a couple of weeks, maybe even 3 weeks, before launching the larger fundraiser for getting my successor dog. I depend on my assistant's dog, Shadow, but he's turning 7 in August. And after immigration, I thought I had already retired him, but I still use him work him on occasion. and now he has started to show less interest in work, but I still have a need for an assistance dog. So even though I live on social aid, I am decent at fundraising. So I'm hoping to fundraise the next dog. I've already picked out the litter. The whelp date is expected to be the 23rd of this month. And the breeder has decided that every dog in this litter will start with C, and names will start with C. And the dog will definitely be male because of the composition of my home already. So I've picked out the name Chance for the dog. So the fundraiser is GoFundMe/F/4 as in the number, dash pause, dash 4 as in the number, dash CJ, 4 pause for CJ. And I would really appreciate it if you have any spare money, which obviously in this specific time of history, it's understandable if you don't. But $5 will definitely help. No donation is too small. So please, if you have money that you can share, I would appreciate it.
Okay, well, I can imagine that having the dogs around, it gives you that. I know for me, my dogs give me a feeling of security, but also on those times when I'm feeling alone, sometimes having that companionship is just so important. And I think especially with autistic people, a lot of us feel very connected to animals compared to even other people.
Dogs have been a sustained interest since I was very little, very, very young. But on top of that, when I immigrated, I actually came at the beginning of COVID. And even though there were not official lockdowns in the United States, there were official lockdowns in Quebec. And I had no friends except for my friends online from Texas and just my dogs for about a year and a half. And I could have absolutely lost my mind considering how isolated I was. But because I had my dogs, I was preserved. There's definitely some things that have changed about me that are obviously from the isolation, but they could have been detrimental as opposed to just kind of quirky.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we always finish with the same question for all of our guests. Do you have a favorite stim?
Oh, I love to say dog, 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 dog.
That's a good one.
And I talk to my dogs, are you dog? Are you fancy dog?
That's a good one. Well, actually, I don't think we've had many vocal stims on this from that question. So that's a good one. That's going to be stuck in my head now. I'm going to be sat in front of my Rottweiler later going dog, 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 dog,
dog, dog, dog, dog, dog, dog. It's good. It's fun.
She's going to look at me like, what on earth happened to you?
Yeah, my dogs they're like, oh, again.
Yeah, I have a Rottweiler and a Labrador myself. The Labrador eats far too much because she's a Labrador. And the Rottweiler, considering she's supposed to be one of the most intelligent breeds, she still hasn't worked out where the door is even when it's open. The number of times I've had to say to her, you're asking to come in the window.
Yeah, that's the window, dear. Yeah.
But yeah,
That's
well,
funny.
it's been really good having you on the live today. I think it's a really important topic, and since you mentioned that dogs have been a vested interest of yours for a while, maybe we'll have to have you on the Especially Interesting podcast to talk about dogs. Because we love inviting people onto the Especially Interesting podcast to info dump about their dedicated interests.
And even if you don't invite me, I know autistic people that have authority on dogs that you might want to invite too. So
fantastic. Okay, well, it's been great having you on, CJ.
It was great talking to you. Thank you.
And I really hope that, you know, some of what you've said has been helpful to people, because I mean, I don't know the statistics, but I can imagine you're far from the only autistic person in our community to have experiences like this. As I said, we're a community that is victimized all too often, especially on the intersection perhaps between gender and being autistic. But I think it's really important that you've, you know, stood up and told your story, because I think it's a story that everyone really needs to hear, where you're comfortable to share it. So thank you.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the next live stream will be, because I'm not that organized, and I know they normally tell you, but I don't know. So take care, everyone, and we will see you on the next live.
Bye.
Wow.